The drawings that we want to do this week really are all about training ourselves to see accurately. And in that sense, I feel like at least a lot of what we're going to be doing is exercises. I think, regardless, as I mentioned, I want you to always think about the drawings that we make as practice. So, one type of drawing is all about seeing details, right? In other words, when I think about drawing, we're really needing to do two things at the same time. We need to look at the bigger picture and understand, okay, this is this big to this wide, right? Understanding proportion. It's here relative to that placement. It's going at this angle, all of these kind of bigger general things, right? So we need to see the big picture. Then we also need to be able to see details, right? Details are really what create a sense of realism and nuance. And that means paying attention to every little kind of shift in edge or placement or angle and trying to accurately represent that. So with contour drawing, that's really what our concern is looking at the details and trying to capture the details. One thing I say quite a bit in class is draw what you see, not what you think you see, or what you think you know, more importantly. In the book Keys to Drawing by Bert Dodson, he talks about it as a conflict between seeing and knowing, and says our natural temptation is to draw what we know instead of what we see. And it's an important thing that we have to not only understand that we're doing and then resist doing that. Our goal in drawing from observation is to capture the richness and variety of visual experience. We should draw for the time being, at least, as if we know nothing, and we're obedient only to what our eye tells us to draw. That's the key to a natural, lifelike drawing. Again, more text from that book, Keys to Drawing. A great example of drawing what we think we know versus what we see is on the right, the two drawings of the tennis shoe. You'll notice the one on the top right, the laces are all identical. They're all crossing. The loops are even. Even the viewpoint of the shoe is symmetrical, right? In other words, this drawing is like a shorthand for what's really there. We know the laces cross, and so we draw them without looking at them. We know there are certain stripes on our shoes or markings, and so we make them symmetrical. But if you compare that drawing to the one just below it on the left, you can see how the artist chose to draw each individual lace, looking at what it was doing, seeing what it looked like as a flat two-dimensional shape. You'll notice that that drawing has definitely much more realism as compared to the one on the top right, which feels more flat. You'll notice not only are each individual lace drawn in a more realistic way, but you can see the loops are uneven. You can see that the shoe is not nearly symmetrical. The left side is a little skinnier than the right. And so all of those things kind of add up to this sense of realism that's there. To expand further on this idea of drawing what we know versus drawing what we see, quote, the single most important thing you must do to learn to draw is to learn to look. We take looking for granted. We assume that we see what is there to be seen. In most instances of everyday life, this is sufficient and even extremely efficient. When we look at our complex environment and focus on what is necessary, we omit many things from our attention. This is a survival instinct, and it saves us energy. I think about the idea of any new situation. Say you walk into the classroom for the first time, right? There's a millisecond of not being sure what to do. And then we immediately find a desk or a chair and sit down. right? We see maybe people that are there before us sitting down. We don't have to walk in and look at every single chair, every single desk to understand what we're looking at, right? The eye automatically picks out things that are similar and things that are different, right? And so we find a place, we get more comfortable, and the next time we come into that classroom, what do? We sit right back down in that same spot. Why do we do that? It really has to do with this idea of survival instinct, right? We no longer have to think about this. We just go in, we know exactly where we're going, and we do what we want to do, right? We go sit down in that spot and we feel comfortable, right? Because it is secure, it's predictable. In other words, we don't have to think about what we're doing because we already have a pattern established. We are utilizing survival instinct, right? So our brain is doing this kind of stuff all the time. It's taking kind of an assessment of the world around us, ordering things to make us understand what we need to do in any kind of situation, right? So we're not really seeing details. We're seeing kind of big picture without taking real notes of what we're seeing. We're just kind of going based on experience and instinct. It says, in this first step of learning to draw, you must reverse this process. You need to become aware of every detail instead of letting all those details kind of just blend in. It says the most important thing for you to do is to look closely as you draw. You'll also work very slowly as you look carefully. It says working slowly allows you to concentrate on what you see. This may not be easy at first, and it may feel frustrating if you're not used to doing this. It may wear on your concentration. You may become impatient or tired. If those are the case, then be sure to take a break as you're working, right? Remove yourself from the drawing space and come back to it. As you're able to do this more and more, you'll be able to concentrate more. You'll be able to spend longer periods of time doing this, and you'll be able to see more sensitively. So this is all about, again, practice. It's training. If you're not used to doing these kind of things, it's going to be difficult, right? Perhaps at first. And we're really, as I said, fighting against our instinct to try to assess the world really quickly and order it so that we don't have to think about it, right? Now we have to, as I said, reverse that process. So one way of drawing, as I mentioned, is contour drawing. Contour drawing is a single, clean, incisive line which defines edges, both physical and visual. It's spatially descriptive, defining the interior complexity of planes and shapes. So it's not just flat two-dimensional outside edges, it's interior forms and edges. It creates a sense of three dimension and perhaps space and depth, right? It's about detail and paying attention to detail and representing what we see as a clean type of line, a confident line. So this is a really great example of a contour drawing, and you can see every edge, every detail has been described with line, right? We have physical edges where we see the outside of the figure's arm or the edge that defines the leg of the figure from the chair, all of these kinds of physical things that we label, understand, this is different from that, right? Figure, chair, garment, background, etc. All of those edges are also visual edges. And there are differences that maybe we don't pay attention to that we can describe with line as well. So, for example, if you look at the line on the figure's face, which describes one plane versus another, or probably more accurately, one side that's in shadow and the other side that's in light, that light-dark difference is described by that somewhat organic line, right? You can see it also on the figure's leg. There's this strange kind of line on the left side that feels a bit jagged. It's following the contours of the muscles, and what that is the shadow side. So those are visual edges, right? Where shadows fall, where we see maybe subtle wrinkles or subtle shifts in color or texture or light dark. All of those kind of minor differences are visual edges that can be described with line. Another thing that's happening in this particular drawing is we see thicker lines, heavier, darker lines, describing perhaps more major edges, and we have thinner, lighter, more faint lines, describing perhaps more minor edge changes. Right? So we can utilize line density or line quality to also characterize what we're seeing, whether it's something that's a strong edge, a moderate edge, or a subtle edge. So I'm going to ask you to do a series of drawings that are all contour drawings. They all use a single confident kind of line to describe all of the details that you see. And again, these drawings for me are more about training yourself to see sensitively, right? And describe all of the details with line. So we're going to do several drawings of our own hand, several contour drawings. And then we're also going to do some what are called blind contour drawings. They're blind contour in that we are not going to look at the drawing. We're only going to look at what we're drawing. In fact, I would say, even though this is an exercise in trying to represent what we see, it's kind of one of the main cruxes that happen in drawing class every semester. It's a problem when we're looking at the drawing more than what we're drawing, right? Because what is drawing? Drawing is look, remember, draw. And when we struggle, when we have problems, we look, remember, draw, 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 and we've forgotten what we saw, right? Instead of look, remember, draw, look, remember, draw. So it's a different kind of sequence. It's a different amount of time spent. In fact, this idea of a blind contour drawing is trying to get you to look at what you're drawing more than the drawing itself by trying to coordinate our drawing hand with our eyes. So the example I have here is a blind contour drawing of a student's hand. You can see several of them. It says, again, in a blind contour, the artist only looks at what they are drawing, but cannot see the drawing itself, either because the drawing is hidden or it's off out of their view. Most students feel very self-conscious about this, and you know, when we're in class, lots of giggling starts to happen and people feel a little embarrassed, but I guarantee they always look like hands, and these actually end up being some of the more interesting contour drawings that we do because they're so unusual, right? They're surprising, they're fun, they're playful, and when they work well, they are describing details and nuances, and they do what I think all great art does, and that is, at least for me, it tells me things I already know, but in ways I haven't seen them before. So it gives me fresh eyes on what I'm looking at. It provokes wonder and engagement. A few other contour drawings and some keys to remember. Look closely as you draw. Do not think about the outcome and whether your drawing will look like the subject. Pay much more attention. Let your concentration be on drawing the shapes you see, the details you see with line. And pay attention to looking and mark making based on what you see. Try to relax and concentrate. again, I think the mindset of thinking about every drawing as practice hopefully allows you to loosen up and only try to draw what you see. Don't evaluate, don't worry about whether it looks good. Just try to record what you see as lines. The next thing you're going to want to do is go through the assignments for this, watch videos, and look back through these examples I have posted on our site.